Mark Rober has discovered the formula for YouTube success, bringing in over 30 million subscribers and 4 billion views in the last year alone. He just doesn't miss. But what does he do differently? Why is every single video he releases an instant hit? To find out, I spent a full week closely studying as many Mark Rober interviews and videos as I could possibly find. 56 pages of notes later, I realized something. Buried across his content, Mark Rober has revealed the exact framework he uses to average over 40 million views per video. And it all starts with a killer video idea. Looking at his channel, we can see that Mark only uploads around once a month. And given how expensive each shoot is,
rarely am I getting out under 6 figures these days.
Mark is rightfully ultra selective when it comes to choosing what he does and doesn't make.
It's always on. It's always thinking. If anything happens, it's like, is that a video? No. Is that a video? No. Is that a video? No. Is that a video? Yes.
And then it makes it into the notebook.
And
In order to make it into Mark's notebook, an idea has to meet 2 critical criteria. It must create an emotional response, and it must have a big payoff. Starting with the first criterion, science has shown that content that triggers an emotional response is more likely to get shared, a fact that Mark is quite aware of.
One way to make a viral video or the way to make a viral video is to just evoke some kind of visceral response in the person watching it. Like, that's the only way to make it. It has to be, for something to be remarkable, it has to be able to be remarked about.
Emotions make something more likely to go viral, and certain emotions are more likely to go viral than others. Awe and, unfortunately, anger perform the best for shareability, while sadness performs the worst. This emotion-driven shareability is why Mark will often pick ideas that are extreme or novel, such as breaking world records or showing viewers something they've never seen before, because they, by their very nature, generate awe. But don't worry, you don't have to break a world record or play with literal lava in order to evoke awe. Awe can be generated through the use of things like superlatives, which give videos a natural uniqueness. Playing with scale, whether large or small, also taps into the human fascination with the extraordinary. Awe can even come from things like comprehensive efforts, long-term projects, and significant transformations. But a novel premise alone isn't enough to spark that large visceral response that triggers virality, which is why before accepting any idea, Mark will first consider what the ending will look like. You see, every single one of Mark's videos feature a large emotional payoff. Whether it's taking a kid to see his favorite basketball team, winning a softball game that was rigged with science, or confirming that an egg had indeed landed intact after dropping from space. You can think of the payoff as a reward for viewers' attention. These payoffs are hugely satisfying, resolving the tension that's been steadily building throughout the entire video. And they deliver that strong visceral response that lingers even after the video concludes. And if Mark's ever unsure about an idea, he'll run it by some friends.
If I can't explain it in like 1 to 3 sentences to you where you're like, dope, that's a cool idea, it's not it. For me, it doesn't work for my channel.
After Mark has an idea that's good enough to make it into his notebook, he has the foundation for his next big hit. But for someone to watch a video on YouTube, they have to click on it in the first place. Which brings us to step 2 in Mark's formula for virality: title and thumbnail.
I'll have an idea. The first thought is like, what's the thumbnail? What's the title?
Mark Rober is part of the Plan Packaging First Club, finalizing his title and thumbnail concept before working on the video itself. And the first thing that stands out when looking at Mark's titles is how concise they are. In fact, his average title length over the last year is a mere 40 characters. This brevity is intentional. Data suggests that on balance, shorter titles tend to perform better, which makes sense given that we have on average a mere 2 seconds to convince someone to click before they scroll away. The short title length, use of title case, and simple vocabulary all contribute to making his titles easy to skim and understand in a single glance. But the main genius of Mark's titles come not from their structure, but from their psychology. You see, each of Mark's titles spark an unanswered question. Why is that ball impossible to hit? Can you blow your own sail? Which liquid wins? These questions create a curiosity gap, which is the gap between what we currently know and what we want to know. To our brains, this feels like an itch that we really want to scratch. And the only way to scratch that itch is by clicking on the video and learning the answer. But Mark's real packaging prowess comes from his thumbnails. Each of Mark's thumbnails falls into one of 2 distinct categories. novelty thumbnails and moment thumbnails. Each type operates differently, but both work towards the same goal, sparking the most clickable emotion on YouTube: curiosity. Novelty thumbnails draw their power from our natural urge to experience something we've never seen before. By showing us something that feels extreme, bizarre, or even impossible at first glance, Mark taps into the part of our brain that craves new experiences and knowledge. But not all of Mark's videos rely on pure novelty. That's when moment thumbnails come in. These thumbnails generate curiosity by offering a glimpse into the moment right before a powerful reaction. Appearing as if they could be screenshots taken directly from the videos themselves, these thumbnails depict a split second of tension, evoking the unspoken question, what happens next? When we inevitably click on the video, we're clicking to find out what happens directly before, during, and after that exact moment. How does Mark choose which type of thumbnail to use for each video? He tests them. Check out this video of his. It's a novelty thumbnail featuring a brightly colored, alien-looking octopus that contrasts beautifully against the plain white maze. But this thumbnail looks quite a bit different from Mark's normal style. It's more minimalistic, and it doesn't feature Mark himself. And if we dig a little deeper, we can discover why. You see, Mark initially published this video with a more classic Mark Rober style thumbnail, featuring Mark presenting the subject of novelty to the camera. But he also initiated an A/B test, comparing that traditional novelty thumbnail with a moment thumbnail that captured an action shot of the octopus seeming to escape through a maze. And finally, he threw a wildcard thumbnail in there, something outside of his normal style, but that most clearly depicted the premise of the video. Over the next few days, Mark ran different tests. After the first test, the moment thumbnail performed the worst, so he ran the test again with the remaining two concepts. With the wildcard thumbnail winning, he initiated another test with another version of the same thumbnail concept. When the original version won, he tried another wildcard concept, and then another, before finally trying one last concept that was almost identical to the first, but with a few key differences. That was the concept that won, and that's the thumbnail that we see today. In total, Mark ended up trying 7 different thumbnails for his video, and the final change was made right here, prompting a large boost in views. Now, if the thought of making 7 unique thumbnail variations per video sounds inconceivable, don't worry, you don't have to take things quite as far as Mark does. But doing your best to come up with at least 3 distinct thumbnail variations per video could be the difference between getting your next big hit and crickets. And if you're struggling to come up with thumbnail concepts that have more significant differences than just a few alternate colors, I want to show you something. This is a tool that can generate as many distinct thumbnail concepts as you want in just a few clicks. It's called Spotter Studio, and apart from being the sponsor of this video, it's also genuinely one of the most useful YouTube tools I have ever seen. Spotter is useful for nearly every part of the pre-production process, from identifying outlier ideas to titles and even storyboarding. But the feature I want to show you today is its thumbnail concept generation. I like to use this feature in 2 ways. Either after I've come up with a few thumbnail ideas myself but want more concepts to A/B test, or when I'm stuck and need some inspiration to get going. Let me show you how it works. First, Spotter allows you to fully customize your input. You can start by entering your video idea, and it will instantly come up with multiple distinct thumbnail concepts for you to choose from. And these aren't just minor variations of the same idea with a few different colors or small adjustments. Each concept is designed with a totally unique composition, with different types of framing, focal points, or color schemes. It's important to note here that these concepts aren't designed to be used directly as thumbnails themselves. Instead, they serve as concepts and compositions you can use as a guide to recreate your own thumbnails. And every single concept can be tweaked however you like, whether it's different variations, compositions, expressions, or specific desired changes. You can try out Spotter for free for 2 entire months, which I highly recommend taking advantage of, through the link in the video description below. Thank you so much to Spotter for sponsoring this video. After Mark has his video idea and his title and thumbnail set, he'll start working on the video itself. And this is where we get to see the real genius of Mark Rober. Because while Mark does come up with killer video ideas, a great idea by itself is not enough to consistently bring in 8-figure views. Other people have executed on similar ideas before, But Mark has one secret that sets his videos apart from all the rest.
A lot of people think they like my videos because I'm a good builder, and that's actually not true. Like, I'm okay at that. There's a lot of people who are better than me, but I will say, I'll admit I'm a pretty good storyteller.
Mark's real genius lies in his ability to craft a killer story. And after watching a truly unreasonable number of his videos, I realized that Mark applies a single storytelling structure to every video he makes. This story structure: setup, tension, and payoff. These three fundamental elements make up something called a story cycle. In mastering this story cycle is how Mark is able to consistently produce videos that are nearly impossible to click away from. And it all starts with a killer setup. In the beginning of each of his videos, Mark sets up two core promises: the plot promise and the purpose promise. Starting with plot, Mark uses the first 30 seconds of his videos to immediately establish what the main storyline is going to be. Let's see this in action with the intro to his octopus versus underwater maze video.
This is my pet octopus named Sashimi, and this is a vault filled with all her favorite food. The only problem is, in order to get to this vault, she'll have to rely on her incredible intelligence and dexterity to make it all the way through this 9-part underwater obstacle course. And just like when I made my backyard obstacle course for squirrels, out of the gate, I will admit in hindsight, I completely underestimated the capabilities of this remarkable creature.
Within the first 30 seconds of his video, Mark establishes the video's plot. As viewers, we can expect to watch an octopus named Sashimi work her way through a 9-part obstacle course. We know that the plot payoff is going to involve Sashimi opening the vault. And if we look closely, we can even see that Mark teases that exact payoff here. The inclusion of the shot is no mistake.
There's something I've heard people call like Jenga storytelling, which is like the start of my videos usually is like, I'll tease that and I'll show them like, this is what we're building up to. But it's Jenga storytelling in the sense that you know how the game of Jenga is going to end.
Yeah.
It always ends the same, but people still enjoy it and they want to play it.
Right,
So
right,
it's
because they're watching the wobble of the tower.
How exactly did it wobble? It's just enjoyable, even though you know the ending, right?
By showing us that Sashimi does indeed reach the end of the obstacle course, Mark assures us that we are going to get that big juicy payoff that we click to see. And the rest of his visuals in his intro are chosen just as intentionally.
There's an amazing thumbnail that got you to click on it. I want to pay off on that thumbnail in the first 30 seconds, so you know I'm not clickbaiting you.
The title and thumbnail both clearly promise an octopus and a maze, and 14 out of the intro's 16 shots depict either an octopus, a part of the maze, or an octopus within a maze. As a result, as soon as a viewer clicks on Mark's video, they're instantly assured that they're going to get what they clicked for. So the intro sets up the plot promise. After his intro, Mark provides some quick background context, establishing how he brought Sashimi home from the pet store and introducing the viewer to some basic octopus foundational knowledge. But then Mark does something very special. Take a look.
After just a few weeks, given how playful she is, it's hard not to form a quick bond. For example, she loved to go up and wave her tentacles in the jet stream, which I assume is the octopus equivalent of a dog sticking its head out a car window. She could play catch with us, she had a propensity for selfies anytime she saw a camera, and whenever we'd put a toy submersible in her tank, she would go full 20,000 leagues under the sea.
What Mark does here is personify Sashimi. All of a sudden, we're not just watching some random octopus. We're watching Sashimi, a playful and mischievous octopus who likes to wave her tentacles in jet streams, play catch, and take selfies. Mark is known for making every second of his videos count.
Every like quarter second is sacred in my videos. Like if a quarter second isn't doing something for me, I'll cut it out.
So when we see him allocate nearly half a minute to the characterization of Sashimi, we know that there's some story-driven reason behind it. And if we keep watching, we can discover why.
And as I did more research, I learned that for the 100 million octopi every year us humans put on a dinner plate or in a pet store, basically all are born and originally raised in the ocean, meaning they aren't bred in captivity, which is when I was hit with the startling realization that essentially made me the bad guy in Finding Nemo.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a twist. Just as we've grown attached to Sashimi, Mark reveals that she was taken from the ocean. And in doing so, he sets up something called the desire. While the intro establishes the video's plot promise, The desire establishes the purpose promise, and the inclusion of the desire is a large part of what makes Mark's videos so gripping. Take a look.
And since no one wants to be the bad guy in Finding Nemo, as much as we'd already come to love sashimi here at Crunch Labs, I did some investigating and found out from the pet store we got her from the exact spot they pulled her out of the ocean. The only problem with my plan of returning her was she'd been hand-fed now for quite some time. So the idea was that if she could figure out and remember how to solve an obstacle course maze, then I would be assured that she could figure out and remember her early days hunting in the ocean, and we could send her back home with confidence.
This is what sets Mark's videos apart from all the rest. This isn't a video about whether or not an octopus can solve a maze. It's a video about whether or not sashimi can go home. And the reason why the desire emotionally resonates as deeply as it does is because of that half-minute of characterization that preceded it. This isn't about the freedom of some random octopus. It's about the freedom of sashimi, an endearing octopus who has a penchant for selfies. We're rooting for her. With the intro and the desire completed, the two promises of the setup are in place. We have the plot promise of seeing sashimi work her way through a 9-part obstacle course, and we have the purpose promise of seeing whether or not sashimi can go home. These promises set up big emotional payoffs at the end. We know we're going to get the dopamine hit of watching sashimi complete the maze, and we're hoping for the wholesome, happy ending of seeing sashimi return to the tide pools of her home. But between the setup and the payoffs come this middle bit, and this is the part of the video that many of us struggle with most. Our setups tend to benefit from high energy, quick pacing, and those big, juicy promises that hook the audience. Our payoffs deliver that satisfying dopamine hit by fulfilling those promises, giving viewers a sense of closure. But how do we keep viewers engaged through the story itself? This is where tension comes in, and Mark constantly builds in tension through the use of inner story cycles. In the octopus versus underwater maze video, there are not one, not two, but 3 inner story cycles. There's a story cycle for phase 1 of Mark's plan, where he tests and observes Sashimi's behavior to understand what capabilities she has. There's a story cycle for phase 2 of Mark's plan, where he puts sashimi up against the maze, and there's a story cycle for the release itself, where sashimi finally gets to go home. Each story cycle re-engages the viewer, hooking them in with a new setup, building anticipation, and rewarding them with a new payoff. To see this in action, let's take a look at the maze story cycle, starting with setup.
After a month or 2 of observation, once we had really come to understand each other, we had all the data we needed to enter phase 2. So after a lot of brainstorming, CAD, 3D printing, and laser cutting, we eventually landed here. Starting at the conclusion of the 9-part obstacle course with the Golden Vault. If she can figure out how to unscrew the vault door, well then she's earned the 3 pounds of her favorite food, shrimp, contained therein.
Here, Mark lays the foundation for the upcoming section of the video. The setup is clear. Sashimi's goal is to make it through the 9-part obstacle course, with the ultimate prize being her favorite food, shrimp, within the Golden Vault. And Mark does something very clever within this setup. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but he includes a quick montage showing the brainstorming, CAD work, 3D printing, and laser cutting that went into the creation of the maze. Mark explains why here.
So that people know that this, when I show the thing, matters, and that it was difficult, I want to give the context for like everything that got to that point.
What Mark is alluding to here is a concept known as input bias, which, if you've seen any of my videos before, you know is one of my favorite psychological triggers on YouTube. Here's how it works. The more effort that goes into something, whether it's time, money, or energy, the more we value it. As a result, by showing us just how much work went into the creation of the maze, Mark subtly affects how much we care about the challenge ahead. This is something that he does in nearly every video of his, whether he's highlighting how long a project took or how complex it was to build. And you don't have to have access to a huge lab in order to leverage input bias. I did it in the beginning of this video. Did you catch it? To find out, I spent a full week closely studying as many Mark Rober interviews and videos as I could possibly find. 56 pages of notes later, I realized something. At the beginning of this video, I specifically mentioned how much time I spent and how many pages of notes I collected while researching for this video. As a result, you as a viewer hopefully started to value my video more because you could tell how much work I put into it. Did it work? You tell me. So at this point, Mark has set up the payoff for this inner story cycle. And by leveraging input bias, he's made us value the story cycle even more. And instead of throwing us directly into the payoff of watching sashimi work her way through the maze, Mark first builds tension by highlighting just how difficult the obstacle course is going to be. As the maze description continues, the obstacles get increasingly more challenging, continuing to build that anticipation of seeing just how sashimi will be able to pull it off.
But in order to earn that succulent reward, she's got her work cut out for her, starting back at the beginning with challenge number 1, the over-under. If she finds a way to get under this barrier through these rocks, well then she's gotta find a way to get over this barrier through these floating balls. And if she manages that, then it's through the green circular portal where she'll find herself face to face with this 4-panel revolving door. And if she works out how revolving doors work and makes it through the next green portal, well then sashimi will basically be met by a wall.
As Mark describes each obstacle, he consistently returns to establishing shots of the maze, helping viewers understand where they are in the obstacle course at any point. This tactic is known as signposting, and it plays a critical role in retention. Confusion is one of the quickest ways to lose viewers, but as Mark describes the increasingly difficult maze, he's careful to return to establishing shots so viewers can track their progress and anticipate what's yet to come. After explaining the obstacle course, Mark wraps up the tension for this inner story cycle. But as he transitions from the tension of the obstacle course explanation to the payoff of getting to watch sashimi interact with the maze, he does something very special. Take a look.
Either way, at this point, she's made it here, and if she solves the final puzzle by unscrewing the vault door, she's not only earned the all-you-can-eat seafood buffet, but she's proven she's quick enough on her tentacles to handle being returned back to her ocean home to the very tide pools she was raised in.
Before transitioning to the inner story cycle payoff, Mark first reminds the viewers of the outer story cycle payoff. This subtle but powerful inclusion rehooks the audience by connecting the immediate challenge of solving the maze to the larger emotional payoff of sashimi's freedom. In doing so, Mark ensures that even as we approach this inner story cycle payoff, we're still anticipating the bigger resolution yet to come. Sashimi works her way through the maze, and just like we were teasing in the intro, she makes it to the golden vault and feasts on the shrimp inside. The plot payoff made even more satisfying due to the tension that had progressively been building up to it. With the plot payoff complete, only the purpose payoff, the release, remains. And the way Mark handles this final payoff is a masterclass in evoking a visceral response. First, the release has its own story cycle, complete with its own setup, tension, and payoff. This structure makes the final payoff even more satisfying because we're taken on one last emotional journey. Mark builds up the anticipation as he transports sashimi back to the ocean, giving us one last chance to root for her. But it's not just the structure that makes this payoff hit so hard. It's the way Mark captures it. The use of cinematography and drone footage creates a visually stunning moment. The wide shots of the ocean and coastline emphasize the freedom sashimi is about to regain, giving us a sense of scale and beauty that elevates the entire scene. The visual storytelling here is nothing short of breathtaking, resulting in a final release that feels simultaneously grand and intimate. And then there's the music. Mark selects a track that perfectly balances melancholy and hopefulness, setting the tone of this bittersweet moment. The music reinforces the emotional weight of sashimi's release, subtly guiding our feelings. And finally, Mark ties in a larger impact. Mark doesn't just release sashimi and call it a day. He relates the moment to something larger than the video itself. It's not just about one octopus finding freedom. It's about the continuation of life. This message extends the impact of the video, making it feel more profound and meaningful. Let's watch all of these elements come together for the final payoff, the release.
And after letting her gorge for a bit, it was time for me to uphold my end of the deal and give her the Finding Nemo happy ending she deserved by driving her 8 hours down the coast back to the exact beach where she was raised. Having figured out and remembered the solutions to all my dumb puzzles, I was convinced she could certainly figure out and remember what it was like to hunt for her own food in the open ocean. And this was a bittersweet moment because there's one octopus fact I haven't mentioned, and that's that their entire lifespan is only about 1.5 years. And as a final act, after laying her eggs, a female will continually watch over and protect them to the point that she stops eating and dies. Which meant in the exact same coves and tide pools that her mother did for her, soon sashimi would be extending that ever-changing tree of life by one more generation. Only perhaps this time creating a new branch of super intelligent puzzle-solving offspring.
Thank you so much for watching and learning alongside me. And in case it might be helpful to you, here's the full guide on how Mark Rober solved YouTube. I'll leave a link to download it for free, as well as a link to try out Spotter Studio for 2 months free in the video description below. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this one as well, where I break down exactly what goes into coming up with a killer video idea. Thank you so much for watching, keep creating, and I'll see you in the next video.